Ever since October 7th, my life stopped. I became a soldier of the IDF, a soldier of Israel on two different fronts. But I want to take you into my story that started on October 7th, around 7:30 a.m. My fiance woke me up. We live 3 miles away from Lebanon. And she said it we're at war. It was a very dramatic way to wake up. We didn't hear about any casualties and things like that, but it was serious because they said a terrorist have invaded Israel, and that hasn't happened in a long time from Gaza. But they also said this might start from Lebanon. So we decided to pack our bags and drive to the center to our parents. I had a feeling this might be bigger than I imagined, although no one told me to come to reserves. So I took my military bag with me. I have a big duffel bag with a vest and helmet and uniform and everything I need beside a rifle, which I don't own. And I was right because 30 minutes in the drive, I got a call from my commander saying, report to base. It was Saturday, it was Shabbat. He's religious. I knew this was serious. Although, as I said, we didn't know what happened back then. We just heard some things on the news. And I dropped my fiance at her parents' home. I gave her this big hug that, for so many of us was the last one. And she was crying. I wasn't, because I was sure I'm going to be back in a few days. I wasn't emotional about it. And she asked me what everyone asks is, do you have to go? And my answer was, no, I don't really have to go. No one can force us to go, but yeah, we have to go if we're being called to literally protect our friends and family, and not just thousands of miles away, but in Israel and a few miles away from where I grew up, and literally in towns that I have so many friends living in. So yeah, we have to go. And the last thing she asked me before I drove off was, should we postpone the wedding, because our wedding was due on October 27th. And again, I said, no, it's probably going to end in a week. And I was wrong in both. And actually, the day of the wedding, I was in Gaza and didn't get married, and we postponed it. And I drove to base, and everything was different because we didn't just go through the same cycle of getting our gear and rifles and getting ready, which takes a long time. The first place they took us to was this room with a big table with dog tags. You might wear them or know them for the hostages, but the origin of these are the soldiers that when we engage in a battle, we have to wear a dog tag with our name and military ID. We have it on our necks and in our boots. And I haven't worn one since my active duty 9 years ago. And that made everything more real. And instead of going from one station to another to take all the gear, we went to this emergency warehouse, and we've been given these big bags with everything pre-packed for us. It can weigh 60 to 100 pounds, and it's ready for war. Grab and go. Then, the news were clearer, still not clear. We knew about the 22 casualties back then, and we had a few minutes to make some phone calls. And I called my siblings, I called my parents, my fiance. You might think that the call with my fiance would be the hardest one because, it's my fiance. But she was going through what so many of her friends were going through at that time. And she knew, because I went to reserves many times, and mostly in the West Bank, some in the Gaza border, some near Lebanon. But it didn't feel so much different back then. It felt different, but we didn't know it was a war. And the call with my mom was the hardest one because she's really not an emotional person. I think I've never heard her cry, even when her parents, my grandparents, died. But she said things that literally broke my heart, like protect both our hearts, or I'm the youngest. And she said, if something happens to my youngest, I'm going to. And my mom thought she was done with the IDF. I'm the youngest out of four. I have an older brother who's also a paratrooper, an officer. And in 1 second, both her sons were called to reserves again. When all of Israel and so many from across the world were in front of the TV, just waiting to hear what's going on near Gaza. And we drove south, and the first thing we did is someone just said, we should write our wills. And it made sense. Although I'm 30, I never thought about writing a will, but I didn't want my fiance to not get the rights of an IDF widower because of the 2.5 weeks that separated us from being married. Had something happened to me. So I wrote it on a piece of paper and I put it in the front pocket of my vest. And the next thing we did is write a letter that you might see on social media when a soldier dies. We know how to do it. I've done it in 2012, I've done it in 2014, and But now you're in a different point in life. Many of my comrades have family and kids, and it's a different letter. It's in my iPhone notes called October 7th, do not open, and I hope no one ever needs to open it. I don't know what I wrote. I just remember thinking that I don't want to go without telling my loved ones that I love them and that I'm proud of what I did and that I want them to keep living. Because if there is one way to go when you're young, is protecting your country and your people, just like our parents did and our grandparents and ancestors throughout history. And we got to the kibbutzim, the towns near the border. We're deployed to an area next to Be'eri and Alumim, and we're tasked to help stabilize the area. Alongside other forces who were there before us, we needed to chase down terrorists and do whatever we need to bring the stability and safety back. But when we got there, it was a combination of a horror and an apocalyptic movie. Everything was either on fire or burnt, bodies on the streets and in cars, blood, bullet holes, bullet shells everywhere, and a smell of death. And the terrorists were there, and hand grenades, and RPGs, and Kalashnikovs, and mini Korans, and the green headbands. And it was real, and it was one of the most peaceful places in Israel that you used to work, just want to travel at and see the nature. And it was horrible. And the first thing I was asked is by my commander saying, "Where is Daniel?" Daniel is a family member of mine. My brother is married to his sister, and he was also serving with me in the same reserves unit. So I checked my family chat, and they said that Daniel was at a party called Nova, which we knew nothing about. Later, we learned that we're less than a mile away from there. And, we saw the first responders who were there first, the active soldiers who didn't need to go get the equipment, they just need to drive there or just were there before. And other soldiers and our forces and my unit, and we've seen things that no one should ever see. You see bodies of women who went through the most horror things you can imagine before they were shot in the back of the head, with their legs broken apart, not just open, broken, and blood coming out. And when you flip them over, you see that they're cut off their breasts, and it wasn't just one or two. And I'm lucky that my unit wasn't in charge of recovering bodies, but the other side of my unit was. And this is what they did for a few days. We had to chase down terrorists, which is, it's very scary, but it wasn't just us. There were many forces, and we didn't have to see so many of these. We saw what we saw outside. One of the days, like the first few hours, we saw a guy that ran away from the party that told the force that, he just was forced. They literally opened his eyes to watch when they were raping his girlfriend, one after the other, about 10 terrorists before they shot her in the back of the head. And it was just horrible. You didn't imagine how big this was, because we're just us in this area, but apparently it was in so many other areas, but we didn't, we couldn't just check social media and news every minute, so we didn't know how big this was. And the second day, our unit found 16 bodies of Thai people outside the kibbutz. They were working in the fields, and we called Zaka, the organization that recovers the bodies. And one of the Zaka members came and he said that he just left the house in Kfar Aza when they recovered 22 dead babies. Some of them were beheaded, some of them were burned, some of them were tied together in a wire. And every day, you just understand how big this was. And I remember the first day, before we even got there, someone from our unit said, "We'd be lucky if this day ends at 500. And we thought it was crazy. And in the fourth day of doing this, I was injured and taken to the ER. Luckily, nothing life-threatening, but I couldn't walk for a few days, and I was unconscious for a while, and they asked me how I was, and by the time I got to the hospital, I felt pretty much better. But the doctors told me that for me, this war was over and I can't go back. Obviously, my family was happy because I was alive, nothing life-threatening, and I wasn't near Gaza anymore. But I thought of my grandparents who are Holocaust survivors, and I thought of my father who fought in the Yom Kippur War, and I knew that this is our generation's war. And as long as I can walk, as long as I can help, I'm going to rejoin my unit. And 2 days after, the first Friday after October 7th, we learned that Daniel was murdered at a Nova party while trying to help a woman who got shot, and it was devastating to the family. He was this beacon of light, the most optimistic person pretty, beautiful guy that all the girls loved, but also so humble. And understanding that he was murdered doing what he loved the most, alongside almost 400 beautiful men and women who were murdered at that party, and that he will never be there. Ever since, we had another joint nephew that is named after him, and life will never be the same, no matter how much we can move on. And that was also the day we decided to postpone the wedding, because Daniel was also helping us organize the wedding, and he was very connected in a nightlife session in Tel Aviv. And I remember we wanted a very specific DJ that was out of budget for us, and Daniel called him, and the DJ called me a few minutes after saying, if Daniel is going to this wedding, of course I'm doing it. So Daniel is not going to be at the wedding, the DJ will, and we're still thinking of ways to commemorate Daniel. And ever since, my fiance and I were just hoping and praying that our wedding list that has gotten shorter will not get any shorter than this. Unfortunately, it has in the following months. And I went back to my unit after a few days, and we got ready to go into Gaza, not before we knew how big this was. We learned the numbers. We knew the atrocities. They weren't just trying to kill as many people as they could in the least amount of times. They were trying to mutilate and make sure people won't be identified, and people will be terrorized forever and just leave. We also knew that they said they're not going to stop until they kill us all, and October 7th was just the beginning. But we also knew that Gaza is the most complicated place on earth to fight in, with thousands of pre-armed buildings with bombs and mines just waiting for us to make the wrong step, with over 300 miles of tunnels, terror tunnels, used by the terrorists with gear and equipment and everything they needed for months. They also had over 2.3 million human shields they're planning to use very well, but they also had over 240 of our people being held hostage. Not just soldiers, but babies, women, elderly, people that could have easily been my family or yours or anyone else's. They didn't think who they were killing and who they were kidnapping. They killed Arabs as well, and they killed Christians, and they kidnapped and killed Thai people, everyone they could see. And we went into Gaza, and we've experienced the most horrific things. And to understand how crazy the world is, I can't even share the specific operations, because the IDF fears that I'll be prosecuted, me or others who are into Gaza, in Hague, if they can connect to a specific operation. But I can say that our units and our sister units have experienced horrible things. One of them walked into a very big mosque in northern Gaza, and they saw a big entrance to a tunnel, but next to it was a camera that pointed at them. And I thought of myself, I didn't know what to do with a camera. I wasn't trained, and I thought I probably would have shot the camera, and this is what they did. But they also triggered a bomb that killed 4 of them and severely injured 6. My friend was the medic in this unit, and he saved his best friend's life, but they've lost so much. In the same day, another sister unit was walking, and they saw about 200 civilians walking towards them, mostly women and kids. And out of the 200, 2 terrorists rose and fired an RPG. Killed 2 soldiers. The rest of them, there are dozens of soldiers and a tank, they didn't shoot back, because the IDF rules of engagement said if we can't kill the terrorists, we're not going to kill 200 civilians because of it. And we found this family of Palestinians that didn't want to evacuate, because they said that 2 days before their neighbors tried to do it and they were killed by Hamas, so they walked them to the corridor. And this Palestinian hugged the Arabic-speaking soldier, and the older brother said, please finish this. Please get us our lives back. We knew that we're not just fighting for Israel and for anyone who wants to live in peace here. We're also fighting for the Palestinians who want to live in peace. And during the first ceasefire, I was chosen by the IDF spokesperson unit to be interviewed to major news channels across the world. And many of them just systematically edited my interviews and answers to fit their agenda. And the reason I was doing it is because I was in there and I speak English, and I'm speaking on behalf of those who are still fighting in there, or those in heaven. So I was sent to America to speak to people who needed to listen and needed to hear about the truth. And I've done a lot of interviews, but the new rule was I'm only doing live interviews, because if you want to ask me questions, you might as well listen to the answers. And I told them they can ask whatever they want, and they can fact check whatever I say. and I've done interviews on the left and the right, and it was great. But it wasn't enough, because when you go to college campuses and when you see the amount of hate, the amount of lies being spread, when you talk to people who are smart, educated, Ivy League students, and you ask them, what's your source of information besides TikTok? And so many of them said Al Jazeera. I knew we're in deep trouble, because we cannot trust Western media. And I was shocked, because I asked these people, what would you do? What do you think we should do? And they all say, ceasefire. And these are smart people. I'm not talking about the anti-Semites and radical Muslims who are paid professional to lead these charters, these chapters of pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas rallies. And I asked them, and they all said ceasefire. And I was like, okay, and then what? Are you going to release the hostages? So many of them said if there'll be a ceasefire, Hamas wouldn't need to hold them. I was like, you don't understand. We're not talking about rational people. We're talking about a radical jihadist terrorist organization that you can't rational with. And I went back to Israel and to Gaza, and this time southern Gaza, and we've experienced more horrific things. And the first day there was a rain of mortars that hit the unit, and 2 soldiers were injured and taken to a hospital with a chopper. Later we learned that one of them didn't even make it to the hospital, and the other one is severely injured and paralyzed. The same day I learned that in this neighborhood, one of my brother's closest friends from they were kids, he was 36, was killed in the neighborhood. He had this famous photo of him, the last one, holding a drawing that his 3-year-old son made for him. Said, Daddy, I love you, I miss you, please don't get hurt. I was close friends with his younger sister, and this is when some people in Israel said that the best or happiest place to be is in Gaza, because you don't have your phone on you and you can't check the news. And when you hear that someone died, you just hear a number of a unit and number of casualties. You don't get the names. And sometimes it's better. And when you get out, when you check your phone, you're just heartbroken, day in and day out. And Israelis are emotionally broken. How can we not be? After what happened to us, after what keeps happening to us every day. But we're also spiritually and physically stronger than ever, because we have to. And I was taken out of Gaza again to go to America again. And I met more people, and I did more interviews, and I've done a lot of events with people who needed to hear because they're on the fence and don't know who to support, or people who supported and not sure they had the truth and how they can help. And also people who are anti-Israel, but not the radical ones, those who needed to listen. And I told them that if I have to make a decision, and I speak on behalf of the vast majority of Israelis and vast majority of IDF soldiers, then we tell you that we just want to get back to our lives. We want this war to end more than anyone else in the world. I want to go back to my life. I want to be at home. I haven't been there since October 7th. I landed in Israel from the US a few hours ago, and I'm at my parents' house. I took my military stuff, and I'm going back in a few days. I want to go back to my fiance. I want to marry her. I want to start my own company. I want to have kids, and I want to grow them to a better world. But if we have to make a decision between keep fighting this war until we get all of our people back and ensure this never happens again, or go back to our lives now and wait to be attacked again, our decision is very easy. And I believe any of your decisions would have been the same. And I was here to tell them that I could not have been more proud to be an IDF soldier. I could not have been more proud to be Jewish and to be Israeli. I could not have been more proud of the way that we engage in this war, because we are the most humane military force in history. And my friends died because of it. But if we forget who we are, if we stop fighting by our rules of engagement and IDF code of conduct and IDF values, then we had already lost. And we cannot lose, because we fight the most horrific, vicious terrorists in history. And if there's one thing we learned from October 7th, is that we need to believe our enemies when they tell us what they want to do. And I'm here to tell you that the IDF will keep fighting for all those who live for the sake of living and against those who live for the sake of killing wherever they are. But I can see the optimism, because when you see a small light in a dark room, the closer you get to it, the brighter we'll be. And together I have no doubt that we will win. But just like the war with Hamas, we'll win, not just because we can, but because we have no other choice.